In the early 18th century, the vast expanse of the Caribbean lay largely untamed, a sprawling maritime frontier. Its azure waters, dotted with countless islands, promised both immense fortune and ultimate freedom. But for many, this freedom came at a terrible price: the abandonment of law, order, and allegiance. This was the Golden Age of Piracy, a time when the dreams of empire clashed violently with the brutal reality of men living outside the rules, their flags black against the horizon. And at the very heart of this lawless world, a vibrant, dangerous experiment was taking shape. The Bahamas, a labyrinthine chain of shallow reefs and hidden coves, presented an irresistible lure. Strategically positioned athwart vital shipping lanes, it offered perfect cover for those who sought to prey on imperial trade. Spain, nominally the ruler, had long neglected these islands, focusing its power on the mainland and its rich silver fleets. This negligence created a vacuum, an opportunity for a different kind of sovereignty to emerge. It was a space ripe for the taking, by anyone bold enough to claim it, or desperate enough to need it. New Providence Island, home to the settlement of Nassau, was initially an English colonial outpost. Its soil was poor, unsuitable for lucrative plantation crops, but it possessed one invaluable resource: fresh water. A small, vulnerable population struggled to survive, constantly threatened by Spanish and French attacks, caught between warring empires. This precarious existence pushed its inhabitants towards desperate measures, shifting from legitimate trade to privateering, then almost inevitably, to outright piracy. Nassau was a town born of necessity, tempered by hardship, and primed for rebellion. The year 1713 marked a pivotal moment, the end of the War of the Spanish Succession. Thousands of privateers, legitimate seafaring mercenaries licensed to raid enemy shipping, suddenly found themselves unemployed. Their skills, honed by years of state-sanctioned violence, were now obsolete. With no war to fight, and no government to pay them, many turned to the only trade they knew: preying on ships, regardless of flag. The line between privateer and pirate blurred, then vanished. This sudden influx of skilled, desperate mariners was the spark that ignited the Golden Age of Piracy. Nassau, with its sheltered harbor and strategic isolation, became an unofficial magnet for these newly unleashed predators. It offered everything a pirate needed: anonymity, a safe haven from naval patrols, and a burgeoning black market for stolen goods. The British colonial government in New Providence was weak, largely ineffective, and often complicit, lacking the resources or the will to assert control. As more pirates arrived, a critical mass was reached. The town's destiny was sealed. It would no longer be a colonial outpost, but something far more audacious. By the early 18th century, Nassau had effectively become a self-governing pirate republic. There was no true government, no governor exercising authority, no courts of law beyond the rough justice administered by the pirates themselves. It was an anarchic society, bound by unspoken rules and the shared pursuit of plunder. Ships of all sizes, flying the Jolly Roger or no flag at all, crowded the harbor. The town buzzed with the raucous energy of hundreds of hardened men, carving out a new, lawless existence. This was true freedom, forged in defiance. At its peak, Nassau's pirate population soared. An estimated 1,000 pirates made this island their primary base, a concentration of maritime outlaws unmatched anywhere else in the world. They were a formidable force, their numbers swelling with every successful raid, every new recruit drawn to the promise of riches and freedom from the harsh realities of naval discipline or grinding poverty. This wasn't just a hideout, it was a burgeoning city, built by and for pirates, a stark challenge to the empires of the age. Its existence was audacious. From Nassau, a notorious fraternity of pirates, known as the Flying Gang, emerged. These were not mere opportunistic bandits, but organized captains who forged alliances, shared intelligence, and often operated in concert. They controlled vast swaths of the Caribbean, their reputation spreading terror across the Atlantic. This gang included some of the most legendary figures of piracy, men whose names would forever be etched into maritime lore. They were bound by a shared code, a common enemy, and an unshakable belief in their own self-made destiny. They would not yield easily. Edward Teach, known to history as Blackbeard, was perhaps the most fearsome of them all. Operating from Nassau, his shadow loomed large over the shipping lanes. His terrifying appearance, a wild, fire-wreathed beard, pistols and cutlasses bristling, was carefully cultivated to strike fear into the hearts of his victims, often forcing surrender without a fight. His flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, became a symbol of pirate dominance. Blackbeard was not just a pirate, he was a master of psychological warfare, an icon of rebellion. His very name invoked dread. But Blackbeard was not alone. The flying gang boasted other formidable figures: Benjamin Hornigold, a former privateer who mentored many younger pirates, including Blackbeard himself, Charles Vane, infamous for his cruelty and unwavering defiance, and Calico Jack Rackham, known for his flashy attire and daring raids. These men, and many others, used Nassau as their strategic base, a launchpad for their depredations across the Atlantic. They shared a common purpose, a thirst for wealth, and a dangerous camaraderie. They were the architects of the Pirate Republic. Amidst this rough fraternity, two women defied convention and carved their own legends, and Bonnie and Mary Red. Disguised as men for a time, they sailed alongside Calico Jack Rackham, wielding pistols and cutlasses with ferocity equal to any man. Their presence shatters the stereotypical image of piracy as an exclusively male domain. They were fearless, defiant, and driven by a desperate desire for a life beyond the rigid constraints imposed upon women in the 18th century. Their courage was remarkable, their fate, harsh. Though lawless in the eyes of the crown, a brutal, unofficial pirate code governed life in Nassau. This code, established on each pirate ship, dictated the division of loot, punishment for insubordination, and compensation for injuries. It was a crude form of democratic governance, with captains elected and decisions often made by consensus. In Nassau, these tenets extended to a broader sense of mutual protection and shared enterprise. Loyalty within the gang was paramount. Betrayal was met with swift and unforgiving retribution. Survival depended on adherence. Nassau's geography was its greatest defender. The harbor, while large enough to shelter dozens of pirate vessels, was too shallow for the large, deep-draft warships of the Royal Navy. This natural barrier provided an almost impenetrable defense, creating a sanctuary where pirates could unload their ill-gotten gains, repair their ships, and plot their next ventures. Barrels of fresh water, a vital commodity, were readily available. It was a perfect strategic advantage, transforming a geographical quirk into a fortress of defiance. The British could not easily reach them. The economy of Nassau during this period was entirely dependent on plunder. Stolen goods, ranging from exotic silks and spices to valuable rum and sugar, flowed freely through the town. Gold and silver coins, jewels, and luxury items, ripped from merchant ships, changed hands at astonishing rates. Legitimate merchants, particularly those from New York and New England, risked life and limb to trade vital supplies and weaponry with the pirates, turning a blind eye to the origins of their wealth. It was a symbiotic relationship built on greed and necessity, a clandestine market thriving in the shadows of empire. The pirate market of Nassau was a bustling, chaotic hub. The goods traded reflected the demands of both pirate life and the wider colonial economy. Essential supplies for long voyages were always in demand: food, powder, shot, and timber for repairs. But the pirates also indulged in luxuries. Silks from the east, spices from distant lands, fine rum and sugar from the plantations, and, tragically, enslaved people, were all part of the illicit commerce. This vibrant, if illicit, trade ensured Nassau remained a critical node in the pirate network. Wealth was fleeting, but abundant. Nassau's taverns were legendary, boisterous dens of revelry, intrigue, and occasional violence. Here, pirates celebrated their latest scores, drank away their fortunes, and plotted future raids. Alcohol flowed freely, gambling was rampant, and the clamor of drunken laughter and fervent arguments filled the air. These were more than just drinking establishments, they were social centers, unofficial meeting places where information was exchanged, alliances forged, and reputations made or broken. They echoed with the raw, untamed spirit of the Pirate Republic. Life in Nassau was a constant cycle of extreme indulgence and sudden peril. Beyond the taverns, brothels flourished, catering to the transient desires of hundreds of single men. Gambling tables were never empty, quickly draining fortunes that had been violently acquired. This hedonistic lifestyle, fueled by stolen wealth, created a unique cultural tapestry, a brief, explosive experiment in untamed freedom. Yet, beneath the surface revelry, danger was ever present. Brawls, betrayals, and the constant threat of imperial retribution underscored every fleeting moment of pleasure. Many of the men who swelled the ranks of Nassau's pirate population were not born criminals. They were hardened sailors, experienced navigators, and skilled fighters, many having served as privateers during recent wars. When peace treaties rendered their commissions void, they found themselves adrift, unemployed, and with limited prospects. Piracy offered an alternative, a chance at wealth, freedom from oppressive captains, and a measure of self-determination. It was a choice born of circumstance, a desperate grab for agency in a world that had seemingly cast them aside. Their desperation fueled their daring. Across the Atlantic, in the gilded halls of London, alarm bells began to ring. The unchecked rise of the Pirate Republic in Nassau was no longer a minor annoyance, it was a direct affront to British imperial authority and a grave threat to the Crown's economic interests. Merchant ships, laden with valuable cargo, were being systematically plundered, choking the vital arteries of global trade. The audacity of these outlaws, establishing their own defiant dominion, could not be tolerated. Action, decisive and brutal, was becoming inevitable. The game had changed. The scale of the threat was immense. Trade routes across the Atlantic, crucial for the prosperity of the British Empire, were under siege. Goods from the American colonies, the Caribbean plantations, and distant lands were routinely intercepted, their value stolen, their passage disrupted. Merchants, fearing ruin, petitioned the Crown for immediate, forceful intervention. The very foundation of British colonial wealth was at stake. The Pirate Republic, once a remote curiosity, had become a cancerous growth that demanded surgical removal. Delay was no longer an option. In a bold, calculated move, King George I issued a royal proclamation in 1717. It offered a general pardon to all pirates who surrendered to British authorities by a specific deadline, January 1718. This was not merely an act of mercy, but a strategic gambit. The Crown sought to depopulate the pirate havens without expending vast resources on a prolonged naval war. It was a chance for redemption, a desperate appeal to those who might prefer a life of legality over certain doom. But would they take it? The stakes were existential. The king's pardon presented a stark choice: forsake the pirate life, accept clemency, and potentially join the ranks of honest seamen or even privateers once more, or refuse and face the full, unyielding might of the British Empire. For many, it was a tempting proposition. The constant threat of capture, the brutal conditions, and the ever-present gallows weighed heavily. For others, the allure of freedom, however dangerous, and the immense profits of piracy proved too strong. It would cleave the pirate community in two, irrevocably. The reckoning had come. The response to the king's pardon was fractured. Many pirates, weary of the constant danger and dreaming of a legitimate life, accepted the offer. Among them was Benjamin Hornigold, a foundational figure of the flying gang, who saw the writing on the wall. He would later become a pirate hunter for the very crown he once defied. But others, fueled by stubborn pride, ingrained criminality, or a deep-seated distrust of authority, vehemently refused. They chose to defy the king, believing their republic could stand against the empire. Their rebellion would soon become a desperate fight for survival. To enforce the pardon and reclaim the Bahamas crown appointed a man of extraordinary experience and iron will, Woodes Rogers. A former privateer himself, Rogers was a celebrated circumnavigator, a man who understood the sea and the motivations of its outlaws. He bore a deep, personal understanding of the challenges ahead. He was appointed royal governor of the Bahamas, tasked with an unenviable mission: to dismantle the Pirate Republic, establish legitimate governance, and restore order to a lawless domain. He was the crown's last, best hope. Rogers's mission was clear, but daunting. He was to sail to Nassau, confront the pirates head-on, offer the king's pardon one last time, and then, if necessary, use force to bring them to heel. Beyond that, he had to establish a functioning colonial government, build defenses, and cultivate a legitimate economy. It was a monumental undertaking, demanding both diplomacy and decisive action. He carried the full weight of British authority, but in Nassau, authority meant little without the power to enforce it. Rogers knew the stakes were immense. In July 1718, Woodes Rogers arrived at Nassau with a small fleet. As his ships approached the harbor, a tense standoff began. Charles Vane, one of the most defiant pirates, refused to surrender. In a dramatic act of defiance, Vane set fire to his own ship, the Ranger, sending it blazing towards Rogers's fleet as a smokescreen, before slipping away in a smaller vessel. It was a clear message: the Pirate Republic would not fall without a fight. Rogers had met his first, formidable opponent. The battle for Nassau had begun, not with a roar, but with a blaze. Despite Vane's escape, Rogers pressed on. He immediately reissued the king's pardon, offering a final chance for redemption. This time, with the royal governor and his warships directly in the harbor, the offer carried undeniable weight. Many of the remaining pirates, seeing the futility of further resistance, laid down their arms. Among them was Benjamin Hornigold, true to his word, surrendering and pledging his loyalty to the crown. It was a significant victory for Rogers, turning a key figure against his former compatriots. The tide was beginning to turn. With the initial wave of surrenders, Rogers immediately set about dismantling the old order and establishing a new one. He began fortifying Nassau, building defenses against future attacks and ensuring the shallow harbor could no longer offer impenetrable refuge. He established a rudimentary legal system, formed a militia from pardoned pirates and loyal citizens, and began to impose legitimate governance where chaos had reigned. His vision was clear: to transform this den of thieves into a respectable, functioning colonial outpost. The foundations of the new Nassau were being laid. But the fight was far from over. Rogers understood that true peace would only come with the eradication of the remaining, recalcitrant pirates. He deputized former pirates, including Hornigold, to hunt down their old comrades. This was a brutal, personal struggle. Charles Vane, Blackbeard, Calico Jack Rackham, and their crews continued their depredations, refusing to bend knee. They represented the last vestiges of the Pirate Republic, a defiant challenge to Rogers's authority. The governor's commitment was absolute: no pirate would escape justice. The pursuit was relentless. Blackbeard, after briefly accepting the pardon, quickly returned to his old ways, his hunger for plunder overriding any promise of peace. He continued to terrorize the American coast, cementing his fearsome reputation. But his reign was destined to be short-lived. In November 1718, Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy cornered Blackbeard in a brutal, bloody battle off the coast of North Carolina. The legendary pirate, fighting to the last, met his end in a violent melee. His head, severed, was displayed as a stark warning. The terror of Blackbeard was finally extinguished. Charles Vane, the pirate who had defiantly escaped Rogers's initial arrival, continued his reign of terror with unyielding cruelty. He became a symbol of unrepentant piracy, refusing any offer of clemency. His flag remained black, his heart unbowed. But his luck would eventually run out. After being shipwrecked and captured in Honduras, Vane was brought to Jamaica, tried for piracy, and condemned. In 1720, he was hanged, his body displayed on a gibbet as a gruesome deterrent to others. The era of his savage defiance had truly ended. Calico Jack Rackham, along with Bonnie and Mary Red, also met their inevitable reckoning. Their ship was cornered by a pirate hunter under the command of Captain Jonathan Barnett. While the men of Rackham's crew were reportedly too drunk to fight, Bonnie and Reed fiercely defended their vessel, showing remarkable bravery. They were eventually overwhelmed, captured, and brought to trial in Jamaica. The two women, however, famously claimed pregnancy, temporarily delaying their execution. Rackham met his end on the gallows, a stark lesson to those who persisted. With the deaths and captures of its most iconic figures, the Pirate Republic of Nassau began its irreversible collapse. The constant pressure from Rogers's administration, combined with the Royal Navy's intensified patrols, made the pirate life increasingly untenable. One by one, the remaining captains were hunted down, imprisoned, or executed. The safe haven was no longer safe. The dream of a self-governing outlaw nation dissolved under the relentless assault of imperial power. The era of Nassau's pirate dominance was drawing to a close, decisively and violently. Woodes Rogers, against immense odds, succeeded in his formidable task. He transformed Nassau from a lawless den into a legitimate, if struggling, colonial outpost. His commitment to order, his strategic use of the pardon, and his relentless pursuit of those who refused it, effectively broke the back of piracy in the Bahamas. He laid the administrative foundations for future governance, established a semblance of peace, and restored British authority where it had been utterly lost. His motto, Expulsus Piratus, Restituta Commercia, pirates expelled, commerce restored, became the enduring symbol of his governorship. By the early 1720s, the Golden Age of Piracy, particularly in the Caribbean, was largely suppressed. The concerted efforts of the British, combined with similar campaigns by other European powers, effectively dismantled the pirate networks. No longer could outlaws find safe havens like the one Nassau had provided. The era of independent pirate republics, where men could live outside the bounds of empire, was over. The dreams of plunder and freedom were replaced by the harsh reality of imperial control and the gallows. A romantic, brutal chapter closed. Nassau, once the roaring heart of the pirate republic, was irrevocably transformed. From a ramshackle den of thieves, it slowly evolved into a legitimate British colonial outpost. Its taverns became less raucous, its harbor, though still busy, saw merchant ships protected by naval patrols rather than preyed upon by pirates. The era of black flags and stolen treasure gave way to the steady rhythm of imperial administration and legitimate trade. The spirit of rebellion faded, replaced by the order of the crown. The change was profound, the victory, complete. The story of Nassau, the pirate republic that dared to defy the British Empire, remains a potent testament to a unique moment in history. It speaks of human desperation, the allure of freedom, and the fierce, unyielding spirit of rebellion. For a brief, tumultuous period, a remote island in the Bahamas became the epicenter of a global maritime insurgency, a place where outlaws forged their own destiny. While the black flags no longer fly over its harbor, the echoes of their audacious defiance resonate still, a wild and unforgettable chapter in the annals of the sea.